Good morning, everybody. It's Coffee and Politics 101 with Sydney Walker. And today, having a great discussion planned today with safety in our schools. So this morning, I am joined by Rena Honea with the Teachers Alliance, AFT Alliance, and attorney Calvin Johnson, who's been on the show before. Rena has been on the show before. So good morning, guys. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Good morning, Sydney. How you doing?
Doing great. I was talking to Rena earlier about a show that's coming up with Von Eaglin. He is a therapist. He's getting his PhD, and his specialty is masculine toxicity, or toxic masculinity, and how we are not paying attention to signs of mass shooters as they're coming up into the ranks in our education system. And so, a lot of emphasis has been put on, safety in the classroom, safety in the schools, but it just seems to be displaced efforts where the safety should be put in place. And Rena, you represent the teachers, and there has been so much talk about, having teachers being armed, which is great if you got an ex-sniper that retired from the military and he decides to become, the physics or chemistry teacher in the high school, or the science teacher or math teacher in junior high. That kind of trained person can handle those high stress situations. But you're talking about a needle in the haystack with having that kind of teacher there. My concern is if, little Miss Johnson, I always use her as the example that, over 50, over 60, or over 40, her focus has just been, nurturing our kids and educating our kids. And now you want her to show up in the classroom, strapped, ready to go, or having a gun in a lockbox. So, students don't have access to this. And it's like, why are we thinking in these terms?
Unfortunately, more and more people are asking about that.
Okay.
And they're wanting that. And there are some individuals in our schools that say, look, I've got a concealed weapon license. I'm ready to do that. But Sydney, when the Uvalde thing happened, you had trained individuals ready to do that type of work. Right. And we see the things that happen there. Yes. Texas AFT did a survey not long ago. 77% of our educators do not want to carry a weapon in the classroom. It is just crazy.
Yeah.
No, society has put so much on our educators. The administrations have added so much work. Not only are we called to be teachers, but we're also mama, daddy, counselor, therapist, seamstress, big brother, big sister. Everything imaginable has been put on the educator as their responsibility, and that is not it. We've got to have parents, grandparents, people in the families to step up from the very beginning. Let the educators do their job of educating our kids. Now, I'll tell you, our educators have stepped up in a way that is just phenomenal. They're doing all of this.
Okay.
And it makes a huge difference for our kids. But it cannot be only the responsibility of the educators, and putting more guns in our schools is not the answer.
So Calvin, I see you shaking your head. Now, you are a criminal attorney, so you're used to seeing, some of these choices in our lives show up in the courtroom with our juveniles and also our adults. So what are your thoughts with this? Because I can imagine being an attorney and representing the mass shooter.
Well, and that's the rough part about all of this. And I have a unique position because I was the attorney at Alliance AFT for a number of years, and I also was outside counsel for a number of years. So I've talked to teachers, and I'm going to echo what Rena is saying. It's very difficult. They're being asked to do 155 things already. Why add one more on? And the rough part about representing some of the defendants in these situations is, even as a private attorney, sometimes I make choices not to represent people like this in these situations. Now, some people think that we will represent anybody, but in some situations, there's certain things I can't do. If you're shooting kids, I can't do it. And everybody has their breaking point. Some people will say, well, your job as a lawyer is to represent anybody who walks through your door. It's not like that. I get to pick and choose. That's why I run my own business. But working with teachers like I have, having a 4-year-old like I have, makes a huge difference, upon which I would not want to represent somebody that way. And the other thing I want to talk about is just what Rena is echoing. You are asking teachers, and I'll use, a lot of people understand this, the Miss Swisher analogy. Miss Swisher was our French teacher. We would not ever want, I wouldn't want Miss Swisher with a slingshot, much less a gun. And we have teachers who for years, and you're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they were not teaching them to be on the shooting range 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Why put that on them? Their job is to teach. Make sure that they can teach, not play security, not play Mr. Otis from Martin. That's not their job.
Right. And that is the biggest question for me is, okay, you have a concealed handgun license. That does not automatically mean that you're able to handle these high stress situations. And we have seen situations, I mean, Uvalde, perfect example of trained law enforcement, peace officers not getting involved in the situation. So here you have people that have spent their career training, being taught to be prepared for these situations, and they didn't engage. But yet you want our classroom teachers, that means also the custodians, all of the administrators, everybody in the schoolhouse building, be trained and ready to take out someone should they come into the school and start trying to wipe everybody out. That to me is not logical. And I can understand, so Rena, you could definitely speak on this because I'm in some teacher groups on Facebook, and I have seen the posts and the comments about, going into other careers, because teaching is no longer teaching, it's teaching to the test. It is all of the requirements. It is everything but what we knew of as teaching probably back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and part of the 70s. And it started changing when Calvin and I were in school. So now we're focused on this high stakes testing and teaching to the test. And teachers are losing their passion for the profession, along with the pay being an obstacle.
I truly believe that until we have legislators that are willing to step up and do what's right, this is going to be a continual problem. And I'll tell you, in Texas, the real issue comes to people's opinions about the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And I believe, in my heart of hearts, I believe in the Second Amendment. I have no issues with people having guns that are hunters, that do it well, that are trained. But in our society today, I believe it's been taken out of context. It says you can bear arms. But if you look at the whole Second Amendment, it says to regulate a militia.
Yes.
We don't have a militia here.
Yeah.
This was made for the states. And we are not a militia.
No.
Individuals,
And
if
that
you're
is,
using it, that's the whole issue. It's being taken out of context. No one wants to take your guns. If you're a hunter, things like that. But until our lawmakers make the law to where you have to be at least 21 to even entertain the thought of buying a firearm. And I truly believe that we have to make weapons like the AR-15. Those are military guns. Those are military things. They should never, in my opinion, be made available to the individuals that are just walking down the street. There is no purpose for that. And we've seen the destruction it causes over and over. And it will continue until we have legislators that will do the right thing, that will make the laws where they're enforceable and hold those people accountable that are selling these guns and make the penalty to where they don't want to do it.
So Calvin, you've been to George Allen, you've been to Frank Crowley. You have to go through a metal detector. They search your bags.
Yes.
We have Skyline, my high school I graduated from. I was taken back when I went to an open house for magnet schools and saw that they put metal detectors in the campus that I graduated from. And so with a campus like Skyline, with so many entry points for all the buildings, that becomes a security risk. But just as Rena was saying, with the military grade guns that are available and not stopping anyone's right to bear arms, to own a gun, and taking it out of context, like, who are we really trying to protect ourselves from?
Listen, let me just say this. When it comes to constitutional law, Alexander Hamilton once said, those rights are relative, not absolute, which means relative to the situation, because Hamilton knew that there probably would come a time where we need to adjust certain things. Why does a 15-year-old, why does an 18-year-old need a AR-15 that can fire hundreds of bullets at a time? And then we're going to compound that, and we're going to ask law enforcement officers with pistols or rifles that fire a couple of shots at a time to go up against an AR-15 like sitting ducks. It just doesn't make sense. And now you're going to compound it again by asking teachers, who teachers are definitely not equipped to be able to go in there and handle themselves in that situation. I consider myself a sane person who can handle myself, but I understand, me having a gun or a weapon, I may not do the right thing. I may operate out of anger, fear, emotion. There's a lot going on at once when somebody's life's at stake, when kids' lives are at stake, when your coworkers and the people that you love life's at stake. Teachers are not built to handle that. People in law enforcement are built to handle that. And what this society is going to have to do is stop arming the other people that are not law enforcement better than your law enforcement. Why do they even need quick firing, multiple firing guns that law enforcement sometimes don't have themselves? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's not about the Second Amendment. It's about common sense.
And you bring up a really great point there, because was it during the 90s in gangland LA that the cop killing bullets came out, and they were armor piercing? So if we're going to be expecting our teachers to show up to school at 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, be there until the last kid leaves, put in all of these hours, are we going to expect them to wear body armor? And when are they going to find time to do all of this, survival training that they would need to go through to be able to, as in the movies, come on, we're expecting them to act like John McCain, not John McCain, but in Die Hard, Bruce Willis character, where you can just, run, drop, roll, pow, 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 take somebody out,
The Equalizer. The Equalizer.
It's like, come on. It's not even real
you.
in the movie. Yes,
Let me tell you, we do have educators that are former military. And they have been trained and all of that. And some of them are more than happy to carry a gun. They're like, let me do it. Let me do it. But in especially I think of our secondary schools, we have some big kids.
Yeah.
They can overpower some of the teachers. And if they come in with a gang mentality and they've got a well thought out plan, and the kids do know how to do this. Our kids are very street smart.
Yeah.
And they know how to do that. If they gang up on someone, then the tables are reversed, and you've got that gun in the hands of someone who probably does not have good intention.
Right.
Right.
Along with a developing brain that doesn't understand the real consequences of choices that they're making.
Right. And so I think we have to give credit to those that are trained, that have carried guns before or do carry them now, but not in a school situation, in my opinion. I think that just exacerbates the problem and makes it much more dangerous because of the other consequences. You have to have the big picture here.
Calvin. And let me say one quick thing. Rena, how many times have we saw teachers try to break up fights of bigger students in school and hurt themselves? And some of the students will get so angry that they're willing to do anything. So if they know that there's a weapon in the room, what happens when the teacher goes to break up one, the other one goes, and who knows? What if they get a hold to the weapon that the teacher has some kind of way? And we've seen things escalate because we've had many teachers trying to just break up fights. And then you have a weapon inside the classroom on top of all that. And then you have multiple kids in a closed environment. It's just not smart.
Well, if you're just tuning in, we have Rena Honea with the FAT Alliance, which is the teachers union here. AFT, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Calvin Johnson, who is an attorney. And we're talking about safety in the schools. And both of these guys have worked with each other. And one of the points that, Calvin, that you brought up that I have heard from teachers that I know, they don't want to step in and break up kids that are involved in an altercation. And you're not always going to have the 6'4", 225, 230 male on campus who's available at the drop of a hat to be able to handle all of these situations. It's like we're not in a society where we can just copy individuals, even though there are conspiracy theorists that talk about clones, and have these individuals everywhere in all of our schools to be able to handle these situations. And Rena, you brought up, the teachers that were former military and now they're in the teaching profession and they're comfortable with being armed. My only concern is, and let's just, in a small high school that maybe has 200 students, they can act fast, they can get to the situation quickly. You have a school like Townview, Skyline, where it's huge. It's a spread out campus. I mean, back when I was in school, a freshman class was humongous. Senior graduating class usually averaged over 700 students. I think our freshman class was over 2,000 of us wild freshmen showing up in the high school. Right. We have arrived. I can imagine trying to have someone have that even though they may want that expectation and feel that they can handle that situation. But I know from being there at Skyline, going from one end of the campus to the other, from F to G building, use up all 6 minutes in between classes to get there.
Right.
And I was walking with purpose and not talking to anybody. So I
Right.
can imagine that you want this teacher, or you're going to have this expectation that Mr. Edwards is going to be able to be the security to take out that particular situation.
Let me be very clear. I made that statement because I know that there are people that are trained that were former military, and they would be comfortable with it. I'm not advocating having them carry at all.
Okay.
I think if we have more guns on any campus, any size, we are opening up the possibility of more danger, lawsuits. If an accident happens, it would end a career and possible lives. So we need to have, and there is a discussion in the district right now about the safety and security, the number of people, the salaries they should make.
Right.
There's a safety and security task force I served on just not long ago. They're looking at best practices, but with all of that being said, there has to be a well thought out plan for a district our size, for campuses the sizes that we have.
Right.
There has to be absolute clear communication. Everybody hears the same thing, and there can be no interpretation or no compromise on the expectation on what each individual's responsibility and job is in a crisis situation. And there's got to be clear cut. This is our leader. This is who we listen to. This is what the code is. If you hear it, get into those positions. And until we do things like that, we are open to anything happening. Now, you can't control a student that has just graduated or graduated a couple years ago that has all of this emotion and anger or whatever built up. And let me tell you, mental health is not always involved here. Everybody, or not everybody, but so many try to say that that kid had issues. There were mental problems going on.
Right.
That may very well be true, but I don't believe for 1 second that's true in every situation.
I mean,
you know, and we have to consider that. We have to be mindful of that. And there again, there's money involved because we do need more counselors in our schools, elementary through high school.
right.
And they need to be relevant and appropriate for the ages that they're dealing with. My personal opinion, and I've said it before, in our high schools, we need to have 2 different kinds of counselors. We need the career and college line, those that counsel on their path, choosing what's good for them. But we have to have those counselors that are our mental health, behavior, getting to the root of the problem for these kids, having good conversations.
Right.
That's money, that's more personnel. But until we do that, we're just putting a Band-Aid on a gaping hole in someone.
You know, it's really interesting that you bring that up because, yes, everyone always screams mental health, mental health, mental health problems. And so when we're seeing an egregious act of this magnitude happening in our schools, these are choices. This is not schizophrenia, where you're hearing the voices in your head and there's a chemical imbalance. And grant you, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. You know, I can't speak with any professional certainty about, you know, those types of situations, but we seem to excuse the situation and say is this. And, you know, I've had children use school therapists, and I've had them in professional therapy where they see someone every week. And the school therapist, and Rena, you can definitely correct me on this. I just don't think that the school therapist has the resources and the capabilities to really be dealing with those deep-seated issues. They may be able to uncover something's going on, but they don't have the resources to really deal with a student who is that troubled.
Well, there are resources available, and our schools try to provide those, but a lot of times you're dealing with parents who are in denial that
Okay.
won't agree to anything further. So you're dealing with that. You're also dealing with people that, for our counselors, their job by state law, 80% of their job is to work directly with students and their issues.
Oh, I'm
things
sorry,
like,
Rena, we're not hearing you. Can you repeat that? I think she
Oh,
may.
yes. State law says that 80% of a counselor's job is to work with the children directly.
Okay.
Their issues, their concerns, all of that kind of stuff. And 20% are paperwork, all that other stuff.
Right.
Reality in our schools is that our counselors are used for testing coordinators. They're doing testing responsibilities. They're doing hallway responsibilities. They're covering classes. There's not enough time for them to actually do their job because of all of the other things that their administrators are putting on them to do as well. And so we've got to get to the point that, number one, we follow the law, we follow policy, and there is no interpretation by any administrator that they can do whatever they want with these people.
That is really unfortunate, because now you're talking about, you know, taking away a resource that is, you're saying, is definitely needed. And that parental part and being in denial. Calvin, I saw you shaking your head and your facial expressions on that. And I'm sure you have had to deal with parents with representing a client that, you know, they're talking about how their child, who is no longer like a child, is not bad. And we're not trying to say that they are bad, but they've broken the law.
Can I say this, Sydney?
Yes.
Sometimes they are bad. And we have to honestly start looking at that being a possibility. Sometimes it's not mental health. Sometimes there are some people, unfortunately, in this world that like to see damage and destruction, that like to harm people. They don't want to be held responsible. And we have to be honest about talking about those types of people. And some of the reasons why you don't want to always say it's mental health, because truly there are some people that do have the mental health issues, but there are a lot of people that just want to do bad stuff.
You know, both of you guys bring up really great points, because yes, there are people that like to see destruction. And typically, though, and I'll definitely have the therapist, and I'm going to have on the show, talk about, you know, these personality disorders, because that does fall into the realm of mental health. Mm-hmm. But there's not a pill that you can give them to help regulate their mood in that space where we're used to seeing it being used for like depression, anxiety, bipolarism, you know, schizophrenia, you know, making those adjustments to the brain chemistry so they can live a what we consider more normal life like everybody else and kind of have the
Yes.
same outlook and expectations and reactions to things. And so there's definitely something that happens where you have this student, you know, coming up through the ranks, and we've all seen them. You know, they're a bit distant, they dress weird, you know, they do the all black, they say to themselves, or, you know, they could be the class clown too. But something happens. Some type of rejection happens that becomes the tipping point that makes them cross over into this conflict resolution that ends with violence versus a conversation and getting a better understanding.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
I just got to say this and I know Rena and Cindy, I know you're thinking back. How many kids were so-called maybe bullied, you know, feverishly, and some of them really wanted to get back at people. And what we're doing is we're making weapons of mass destruction, in a sense, that can fire multiple bullets available to some of these people who want to get back at people. And some of these young folks, because they're young developing minds, when they're bullied and they're picked on and they're made to feel like they're the outsider, they're capable of anything. But we're making weapons available to young minds, young impressionable minds that are still growing, that have been pushed to their edge. And we got to stop doing that. I'm not trying to take anybody's gun. We just want to make sure that they don't get in the hands of people that can hurt a lot of other people.
You know, it's so funny because both of you guys have echoed this. I mean, you go to, so I've gone to the pharmacy. I have bought Primatene Mist because it is a former ingredient in a lot of fat burners that used to be sold over the counter. I used to compete. So my Wong is the herbal version of it. You can't buy it. Primatene Mist, Sudafed, all of those things now are kept under lock and key. You have to provide your ID. You are tracked on how many times you have bought these agents, because one, you can make, you know, use to make drugs with. The other is hazardous to your health if consumed in too large quantities for too long. We have regulations on that. But we have no regulations on the number of bullets that you can purchase. We don't have regulations. So if Rena had a collector's item gun and she decides that she wants to sell it, and she lists it on some, you know, site online, and I decide that I want to go and buy it, I can go and buy it as long as we agree on the price. There's no background check. Rena has no responsibility to make sure that I am going to be, you know, this law-abiding citizen with this item. And so it seems that, you know, a lot of people have said, because I've read the comments, oh, well, you know, the criminals are going to get guns. So there's no need for us to have these restrictions because the bad guys don't abide by the law. And that's true. That's true.
The penalty isn't large enough. It isn't deep enough to make the impression. If you do this, there are definite consequences. But I think also we need to consider if they're going to a gun shop and, you know, the background check's supposed to be there and all that.
Yes.
But I think if they're a young person, 18, 19, it should be, I would hope, somewhere someone would have the sense that that gun shop owner would call the school district and say, look, I just had a young person come in here. I don't know if they're part of the district, but possibly a way to alert the district so they could do a little bit of evidence and fact checking to see, is this someone we saw a lot by our counselors or by reports of bullying or things like that? And to give kind of a heads up, we have to be thoughtful of every possibility to try to make our schools the safe havens they're supposed to be.
And,
And so,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
until we do things like that, until we have legislators that make these laws and give direct instruction and consequences for what happens if you don't do it, we're going to continue to see this more and more and more, I'm afraid. And that's one of the things that people are considering, that are educators, have been lifelong educators, or that may have thought, I want to be an educator. They're thinking, I don't know, am I truly willing to put my life on the line for kids that aren't even mine? Who's going to take care of my kids if I'm taken out? But
And that
educators,
is almost becoming a question now, regardless.
yes, it is indeed. You know, the attacks on educators now are very discouraging. People don't want to do that. The low pay in Texas is incredible. Districts are doing, for the most part, especially our smaller districts, are doing what they can, but these larger districts, they're sitting on money that should be in paying
The classroom.
equally the work that's being compounded and added on every day. It is incredible the amount of stress and paperwork, much less alone the responsibility of teaching. You don't have time to prepare lessons to be really good for your kids because of all of the outside stuff.
That's being
And our members have been talking to administrators about this for years, and it just continues because of the push on testing, the push on pay for performance. Education is a collaborative profession. We work together for the better of the kids, but that has become null and void to some degree because of the pitting of teachers for competition. You and I might teach the very same lesson almost in the same way, but because your evaluator thinks much higher of you than they do of me, you're going to get a better grade and a better evaluation. So I'm not sharing my stuff with you.
Right.
Because I want to be credited for my work. Right. And not compared all the time. And we don't have that mentality. We have so many brand new administrators that are learning how to be administrators. And it's a constant struggle.
Yes, Calvin.
You know what, Rita? You know what y'all said, and to nip it in the bud. The goal of being involved in education is to educate the person and to educate the kids. Right. And what we're doing is we're making teachers be in competition with each other. We're making them teach to test. We're making them, now I got to play security. I got to be Mr. Otis of the Equalizer from the movies or the TV shows. Now, I already don't have enough supplies. Y'all willing to spend $1 billion on security, but I have to still take the little money I'm making, which I don't make enough.
To make sure that the students have enough pencils and paper and those things. And so, Calvin, I do want you to make a comment on a comment that you had posted, that, you know, here it seems to be a battle with constitutional rights and raising the age when it comes to buying guns. And he makes the point of, you know, raising the age on a lot of things. And I get where Ewan is coming from. He's an educator. We've had a lot of discussion about this. And I will definitely say that in my lifetime, I have watched children become more empowered than the parents. And the parents being regulated in such a way that they're not able to parent and put those consequences in place, because now kids are savvy, you know. And look, and I threatened my grandmother with calling CPS on her, and honey, she told me that they would not get there fast enough to save my life. Honey, I knew at that point that was null and void to even threaten her with that. because she
I
would
was
be
coughing.
willing to go to prison. Or the tactic was enough that it scared me that I just wasn't going to chance it. And now, kids are empowered to make these reports. And this is one of the things I don't like about red flag laws is that if you have someone that has beef with somebody, they can go and report this person. They're going to be investigated, and now they're put on the defense. Somebody could say that I have a gun, and now I have to let people come into my house to prove and let them search to show that I don't have a weapon, even though somebody reported that I had one. And so now it's this, it seems to be this battle of manipulation and control versus, us raising our kids to be what we say society is supposed to be.
Yes, we're slowly losing control. And legally, there are a lot of things, just like you said, the kids now, if you're trying to discipline them, they can call CPS on you. There are other situations where the kids have a lot more rights than the parents, but the minute that the child is not raised properly or that's in trouble, the parents are the first people that they look at. And
Right.
a lot of it is because they have so much access to social media, the internet, the level of parenting. And let's be real, Rena, we talk about this all the time. The level of parenting has been reduced to an all-time low. A lot of parents want to be their kids' friends, and that's great. But there are times, the majority of the time, you got to be their parent because that's why you're there. Sometimes you have to set parameters, and a lot of parents nowadays don't want to set those parameters. And now that's being left to who, Rena? The teachers. And one more thing left. So now I'm setting parameters. I got to play security. I got to be a hall monitor. I got to be a counselor. I got to buy their own supplies. I got to make sure that the kids eat because a lot of them don't even have enough money to eat food.
Right.
So
And
now I got 15 more things.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to rear them too.
Yes.
And you can't do that.
So, Rena, I do want you to comment on, since we made the switch with the schools where, visitors have to check into the front office, provide identification, they have to get a name badge put on them. They have to be, screened and qualified to be on the campus. Obviously, has this really done anything with making our schools safer?
I think it does give the opportunity for some screening. I know that our district, especially the elementary schools, they are building what's called the vestibule area,
Okay.
where if they ring in, they're led into another little room type thing to where there's another set of doors that they have to enter in.
Yes.
So there are two sets of doors, and they're trying to get those installed in all of our elementary schools. And at some point, they'll be in all of the schools. But once they step into there, then someone can physically see how they're dressed, if it's appropriate, if it's not appropriate, if they've got a long coat on or, so
Right.
that there is more security. So the things that are going in place, I think are definitely helpful. Not having the doors just somebody walk up and be able to get in, keeping those doors locked from the outside is definitely a plus.
Okay.
But there again, you have to have resources to be able to put all those cameras in place, make sure that they are working, make sure you've got personnel to be able to handle that. Our school secretary usually is charged with that job, or whoever's right there, to be able to check and look and see if this, so there are a lot of things that are happening. It's just an issue that we have to go back to basics when it comes to common sense. If we overthink and spend tons of money on things that aren't relevant, we're wasteful. And unfortunately, with the mentality that testing is going to make our kids smarter, we're going to have generations of bubblers. They can fill in these little answer sheets with
Tantrums.
bubbles on them, you know? But when
Yeah.
it comes to thinking critically, problem solving, working together, those things are almost left out of the curriculum because you're mandated to follow certain things. The creativity of the teacher being able to reach kids in different ways, all that's been taken out by the legislature and by the administrations. So we've got to get back to letting teachers do the things they know, work with kids. Don't drive our educators out. Pay them what they're asking. And it has to be within reason, but educators, for the most part, don't want to be millionaires. They want to be able to live in a way that can take care of them, their families, themselves, to
Yes.
live in the neighborhoods where they work,
Right.
that slows down the commute or lessens the commute. In Dallas alone, inflation is, I think, around 9.1% right now. We have teachers that commute because they can't afford to live in Dallas.
Right.
With the
Right.
price of rent going up,
Yes.
all of that, we have to take control of getting legislators that are common sense people. People need to vote for issues, not vote in the name of a party. They'll vote against their own interests just to vote for a party.
Yes,
And
we
we've
have to
seen
move
it.
away from that for sure.
Yes, we've seen it over and over, and it's getting worse and worse.
And Rena, you bring up a really great point because, I was born and raised in South Dallas. And so when my aunties were going to school, and almost everybody in my family graduated from Lincoln, except for my youngest aunt and I. And so there was a teacher that lived up the street. And so during that time, they were accustomed to seeing their teachers in the community. So when my oldest was going to the neighborhood school, I tried to talk to teachers to move into South Dallas, but food desert, the crime or the perception of the crime in the area, even though I'm talking about the 90s and the early 2000s, where you could get a house for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
Yeah.
You could rehab it, make it into what you wanted, even on a teacher's salary, and have that equity, have that, American dream achievement. But, they didn't want to live in the area. And so, not everybody could afford to, live by some of our more affluent areas like Harry Stone, because that's a particular school that there's waiting lists to get into that school. Yes. And so, you have this disparity, and I say it all the time, is because the teacher profession is still primarily female. And if it was predominantly male, predominantly white males, we would see a drastic change in the pay. We would see a drastic change in how teaching is done, because now we have the quote unquote, those that are in power driving everything. So, the man brings home the bacon, takes care of the family, la, 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 la. And teaching, home ec, even in my former profession, being a dietitian, it's just that career that you have as a woman, because you're still taught to marry up and your husband is going to be the provider. And so I think until we have those changes in the profession, some of the problems that we have, we're still going to have them. And so I do want to circle back on the families with the denial, but also, the families where their child has been identified as having some signs or some symptoms that something could be brewing, especially for DISD. A lot of our students live in poverty. Their parents don't have, health insurance provided by their employer. And even then, you're only going to get so many visits per calendar year under your insurance. So you may not always have the financial resources to pay for therapy that this kid needs. And so, then you say, well, community, come on in. But there's only so much that the schools are going to be able to do in those situations.
District has
Yes.
tried to address that in some ways. Every high school, I believe in Dallas ISD, has what's called a youth and family center.
Okay.
And those youth and family centers have psychologists and counselors and personnel that are available to students and families.
Okay.
Now, there needs to be a referral, I believe, from the school or
Okay.
a feeder, a school that feeds into that high school. But they've tried to do those. They're looking at increasing the number of counselors that have available resources. There are community resources that have made themselves available. But that's why it's so critical that we have counselors in the elementaries that can follow kids, that can provide those services and get them to the families. Community schools that have wraparound services are so vitally, and the reconnect centers for our high schools are a purpose that is for. Not
Okay.
only to help the kids to catch up if they're behind in their studies, to help them get the credits to graduate, but they also have these other services. But as we all know, there needs to be more.
Right. Right. And Calvin, so with the criminal justice system, I mean, we've had discussions about reform, and Dallas County does a lot with a lot of divert programs with, our youth that are legally adults, but they're still young. We're helping to course correct some of these issues. Can you talk about, what are we doing in Dallas County, which is just, one of 254 counties in Texas, but still something has to be done so we make sure that we're not having this problem here in Dallas County.
Well, a lot of the judges have set up mentoring programs. They set up programs that hold probationers a lot more accountable. I know Judge Ernie White in the 194th has a program where he brings those guys in weekly, the guys and the young ladies in weekly, and they report on the progress that they've made. Some of them have drug issues. Some of them will have some mental health issues. He makes sure that they take your analysis test. He makes sure that if they have an issue with drugs or they're having some mental health issues, that they go and they do the appointments. So if you're supposed to see your counselor and you miss that, they're going to put you in jail. They're going to say, no, you have to do that. If you have to go get some help and take some classes and you miss that, no, you're going to go in for jail for a few days because you have to do that. You can't let anything get in the way of you getting the help. We're going to help you, but we're going to hold you accountable at the same time while we're helping you. And I know Judge White, Ernie White has a great program that does that. And a lot of the female judges, I think they have, I think it's Judge Lisa Green, Judge Shaquita Kelly, Judge Mitchell, those ladies.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got program. It's they have like to prosperity. I forgot the name of it, but what they do is
I've had them on the show. Yes.
Yeah, they pair us up.
Yes.
I help them. I take on a couple of people that I mentor, and a lot of the defense attorneys and other people in the community. We line up with those people. I have one young man that I met through the program that I still work with through this day, and I've been able to help him because he's recently become a father, and he's coming to me for advice. So it's those types of programs that the Dallas courthouse, especially our judges, are implementing.
And it's one thing that I definitely want to say, that with the focus on mental health, what we're not talking about, which is what some of these programs that you all have mentioned, are focusing on building self-esteem. And that is a major part of someone's base to meeting Maslow hierarchy of needs. And I mentioned this on the show. We have self-esteem issues. We doubt ourselves. We doubt our capabilities. We have heard from a bully or just anybody in our lives tell us that we're not worthy. We don't have, the common sense. We don't have this. We don't have that. And those things stick with you when you're young and you act them out. But there wasn't anybody there that took the time to say, baby, no, you really do have this in you. You're not what someone else is saying. Yes, Rena.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Calvin was talking about, unless, and I haven't checked on it lately, but I know that there's some judges that are offering first-time offenders that are nonviolent the opportunity to go into a trades program.
Yes.
Work with the tradespeople. We definitely need trades.
Yes.
Our plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians,
HVAC. Yes.
all of that. Go through the program, work with those men and ladies, and build exactly what you're talking about. Build their skills, their self-esteem, and they become productive citizens. They're not part of our prison system.
Right.
If they take the opportunity to do that. And that's another way that our Central Labor Council has been active in promoting that.
Right.
Working families have those opportunities. And it's we're trying to get more into our high schools, the counseling part where the tradespeople are also part of the agenda.
Oh, good.
Give them options. We have many of our kids that have worked with their parents doing auto work, doing plumbing, doing masonry, doing electrical work. They've grown up, they got that skill, but it was misplaced somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
So giving them those opportunities to get back in, it's a great program that some of our judges have bought into and believe in, and we're seeing great results from that.
That is wonderful to hear. Because I will say that I was an adjunct at Lincoln Tech, and there were students in the program that were there because they got in trouble with the law, but to have a clean record, they had to go through the associate's program. And I tell you that even though I was teaching college algebra and environmental science, there were times that we had conversations about, who we were as people and how we treat each other and what we think of ourselves. And sometimes it was amazing to hear, the students, and they were predominantly male. I had one female throughout the entire year I was there, to get the mindset and help them see a different perspective, and to say to them, you don't have to agree, but at least give the person an opportunity to say it and hear it, because you may learn something new. So it's 11 o'clock. I do want to be respectful of you guys' time. So Calvin, any final thoughts on this?
No, I will. I'll just say some things quickly. We have to put our teachers in a position to succeed, and asking them to be the equalizer, asking them to carry weapons and go through weapons training on top of everything else that they do. To me, you're just getting further and further away from what you're hired them for. Let them teach, give them some supplies that they need to be able to teach, and parents in the community, we need to do the rest so that they can do the jobs that they were hired to do, so they can get us better results. If we just let them do what they were hired to do, our teachers are capable, they're smart, and they're committed, and they can do great things if we just put them in a position to succeed.
Great. Rena, final thoughts.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for having us today. This subject can be talked about And
Oh,
it will
yeah,
be
we can
talked
go on
about for a
another
long, long
2
time.
hours, easy.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. And the
Yeah.
conversations continue, but we have to have the big picture in mind, break it down into common sense things that we can do together and make this a much safer place for our, not only our teachers and support workers, people in the schools, but for our kids and our families and our communities. So it's an ongoing issue. We'll keep
Yes.
working at it. And thanks for having us today.
Well, guys, I just want to say, one, thank you for your time and coming on the show. Thank you for the work that you do. And Rena, yeah, I want to stress something that you brought up, and voting against our best interest just to vote with a party. And we have to say, what society do we really want to have here? And it needs to be safe for all of us, not just those with means or considered elite or affluent or wealthy. And you shouldn't be penalized because of the zip code that you were born into, brought up, the economics that you were dealt with, the family that you were born into. And that should not be a curse. It shouldn't be a hindrance, nor should it be a pathway
Right.
to a particular place in society, because we're all, telling our youth, our kids, that with hard work, it pays off and they can become anything that they want. And if we really want to give them that message, then we need to make the choices that enable that to come about, and not take people's choices because of their gender or their race or their
Right.
socioeconomic status. So thank you all for the work that you do, Rena. And I cannot, Ron Price and I have had so many conversations about you and what you stand for and the fight that you put up with for our teachers and our students. And I'm very grateful that you are the leader that you are, because
Thank you.
are standing behind our teachers, and teachers make all of us. I'm a product of Mrs. Ray, Mrs. Roberts, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Irene Redmond, or Ms. Irene Redmond, Felicia Brooks, everybody whose classroom I entered. I'm a reflection of them. And I always want to make sure I made people proud. And we have
I'm
to
sure
stop.
you do.
And we have to stop thinking so selfishly that everything is about us when it isn't. And I'm getting emotional.
That's okay. We need more people to be emotional in a
Oh,
good way.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. God gives
Yes.
us those tears, use them. They send off internal things, and it's a good thing. I wish more people would.
Yes. So, which is why I did the show. And we have an election coming up in November. So people
Yes, we do.
vote not for a party, but for what's good for all of us. And there's not one group on this planet that should be determining what is good for all of us when it excludes other people. So remember that when you are at the ballot box, send a message. I have a classmate that went through a lot of those teachers with me, and we're getting fed up with what we're seeing. And we have to start making a change. Those of us that are feeling the results, those of us that have the best interest of everybody, not just a particular segment of the population, need to show up and show out, because our society depends on it. So with that, I'm going to end the show. You guys stay cool. We have a heat advisory until 7 o'clock this evening. So drink your water, hang on to your loved ones, and stay safe this weekend. And I will see you next Saturday is holiday weekend. So I will see you on the 9th. Make sure you check the page to see what shows are coming up. Share and like and spread the videos to everyone that you know. Everybody have a good weekend.
Take care.